Hope Sent a Quiver. Written by OrionLady on AO3. Read by Alextras. Chapter 21. Can we open them now? Not yet. Clint held Lila's hand while Peter led Cooper along by the elbow. Just a little farther. Treehouse, said Peter. Cooper dutifully lifted his foot high enough to avoid tripping. Exams start tomorrow. Lila frowned and squeezed her dad's hand. I know you two have been cooking up some big project in the woods, but can't it wait? Nope. Clint popped the pea. He was clad in just a t-shirt with the late May heat. Pete still in long sleeves until he became less anemic. Lila wore a purple tank top, though Cooper, in his fastidious way of dressing, had on a short-sleeved polo shirt. Clint arranged his kids at just the right angle. And now! Clint and Peter stepped back to take in the two teens, their eyes opening. Then they squinted, then bugged in a comic twinning routine. A treehouse? Lila broke into a megawatt smile. You built a real treehouse? We never even had one of these as kids. Happy end of term, you guys. Cooper did a full loop of the tree and fist bumped Peter. You figured out the arris angles for the slope of the maple tree. Nice. Clint ran a hand down his face. This is your future, Clint. Congratulations. Welcome to Nerd Paradise. If he had any concerns about a treehouse being too kiddie of a gift for his teens, Hawaiian hammock and all hung up inside, decorated with tiny string bulbs and fairy lights, it went out the window when Lila squeaked, This is awesome! Nate's going to lose his mind once he wakes up from his nap and sees this. We can have study parties in here. Lila whacked Cooper's chest. Don't be so boring. I have a fresh deck of cards in my pocket. Let's play some rummy. They roped Peter into climbing the ladder with them, and a chorus of oohs and wows trickled down to Clint from above. He shook his head and left them to it. Sundays were a free-for-all in the Barton household, but tonight he wanted to make supper. He wandered back to the house and put on a pot of water to boil for pasta. Laura hummed while she drifted from the woodshed to the upstairs bathroom meadow, tool belt around her waist and a carpenter's pencil behind her ear. Clint had just finished grating Parmesan cheese when a sleek black car vroomed up their driveway. A quiet engine, newer model, no plates or identification whatsoever. It likely didn't have a serial number either. Clint shaded his eyes and went out to greet the familiar face that stepped out of the driver's side. Wasn't sure you'd be able to get away. If anyone asks, I'm at my 4 o'clock chiropractor's appointment. Director Maria Hill wore high boots and pillar-leg palazzo pants under her leather jacket, but somehow she didn't look out of place in the farmhouse scene. She closed the car door and surveyed the Barton property. Still planting those weird carrots, I see. They're a European variety. They're white. Clint snickered and waved her along towards the trees. You staying for dinner as promised? Only if you've got beer. Maria's fond expression gave her away. Clint scaled the treehouse ladder when they reached it, finding all 3 kids seated on the floor around a row of cards and in a giggle fit over something Cooper did. You can't just flip a card whenever you want. Lila's machine gun laughter echoed off the wood on either side. Yes, I can. Cooper protested. It's in the rules. What rules? How to cheat at Cards for Dummies? I saw that trick a mile off. You're getting slow. I stole 2 cards earlier, plus swapped hands with Pete. Lila squawked and threw her cards at Cooper, who whacked her in the face with a nearby pillow, the best kind of retaliation. Peter laughed, though he didn't join in the sibling banter. Pillows, cushions, and warm lights gave the space a cozy blanket fort ambience. Cooper had already pinned up some of the posters and sketches from his backpack. All right, party people. Clint clapped his hands to catch their attention. Supper's on in half an hour. Wash-up time. Lila trundled down the ladder first, with high fives for Clint and Peter. Thank you so much for doing this. You guys are the best! Cooper hopped down last and surprised them all by pulling Peter into a fierce hug once their feet hit the ground. It's so cool to have you around now. Yeah. Peter hugged back in a tentative starts and stops. It was fun building the treehouse. Fun, as in Clint let him use his sticky powers to skitter up and adjust the roof sheeting. That, or he was referring to the copious amounts of unnecessary math formulas he'd presented to Clint. Either way, Clint huffed the huff of a burdened man. His fond expression gave him away too. Aunt Maria! Lila darted over for a hug from her. We haven't seen you in forever! You are so right. It has been positively ages. Maria bent down to pat the girl on the back. Unacceptable of me. Good thing she had the heels on, because she looked stunned to see how tall Cooper had grown since the fall. I'm hugging a skyscraper now. Cooper laughed and wrapped his arms around her. Are you eating supper with us? I wouldn't dream of missing Clint's famous ravioli. Yes! Lila pumped her arm. You guys go on ahead. Set the table for us. Clint settled a hand on Pete's nape. I've got a surprise for Pete too, and then we'll be right there. Peter waited until the other teens raced each other back to the house before turning to Clint with an anxious frown. Surprise? Clint pointed at Maria. Director Hill. Peter held out his hand. Good to see you again. You know who I am? You're the head of S.H.I.E.L.D., the public face, anyway. Maria glanced at Clint while shaking Peter's hand. You were telling the truth about him, us having met at the memorial. Of course I was. Peter bit his lower lip and sidled closer to Clint. You told her? I had to, if I was going to help you. Clint noted the torn look in Peter's face. Just trust me for a minute. Okay. And technically, I'm now the head of an unnamed international intelligence agency. Maria used her fingers for quotations. Like a UN for superheroes and spies, the better version of Ross's abysmal accords. It's basically S.H.I.E.L.D., Clint stage whispered to Peter, who relaxed when Maria scoffed. Peter rocked forward on his toes. So you remember me too? Maria's strong jaw melted into a thin smile. No, Peter, I'm sorry, but I officially took up your case and did some digging. Interviewed as former Sorcerer Supreme, which was a career first. How did you get into the sanctum? Maria quirked a manicured brow. I broke in. Their security is terrible. Oh. Peter blinked. What did Stephen say? Did he remember? Dr. Stephen Strange remembers the battle on the Statue of Liberty with Spiderman, then escorting some plucky teenagers to safety after. But when I said your real name, he was blank. I explained the whole story to him and he paled, started shaking. To be honest, I think he regrets it. I may have threatened him not to pull a stunt like that again. Just a little. Peter went silent for a while. Maria and Clint waited him out with the crafted ease of their profession. Then why does Laura remember bits and pieces? I get why Clint does, but... Maria placed a hand on Peter's shoulder. Strange helped explain this, at least. The spell is essentially designed to make certain synapses in the brain's hippocampus go dark, the ones that light up in recognition for a given person. The same effect as when someone has a stroke or severe amnesia after an accident. It's based on electrical impulses, part of the reason it wiped digital records of you too. Peter looked more disheartened than ever. So Peter, not only are the memories still there in people's brains, but this doesn't account for hormones and neural responses. Peter gasped. At least somebody understood what was going on. What are you saying, Maria? Asked Clint. Maria thumbed Peter's shoulder once and straightened. I'm saying that this spell has no control over emotion. The closer people get to Peter and form lasting bonds, even if they feel like it's the first time meeting him, the more it'll stimulate axons in similar areas, however dormant. Like two magnets drawn together, said Peter. Sure, whatever metaphor works for you. My, how this felt like a trip to Bruce and Tony's old lab. Good memories if you enjoy feeling like you'd stepped into a foreign continent where only two people spoke the same language. Clint tried to break down the jargon into practical terms. Love and new memories of Peter are an access trigger for the old ones, the forgotten images. Maria thought for a moment, waffled her head, then nodded. Yeah, you've got the gist. A terrible simplification of things, but Strange was a neurosurgeon, so some of it went over my head too, no pun intended. Clint could practically track the chemical formulas whizzing past Peter's eyes, brain trying to piece everything together. Love had certainly been the key for Laura. She'd cried in Clint's arms that night a week ago after Peter revealed his identity, happy tears for this boy who trusted her with the truth, and sad tears for May, and excited tears for what she and Clint talked about long into the night. He'd called Maria the very next day. Even if Strange hadn't explained all that, said Hill, I'd still believe you're Peter Parker. Peter blinked up at her. You would? Maria brought out her phone and flipped it around to reveal a photo. Did you know Happy Hogan has been tearing out his hair for 8 months because he can't solve the mystery of May's safety deposit box? No resources in the world are helping. Peter's mouth dropped open. He stared at what looked to be a pile of laminated documents on a metal table. They're me. Maria grinned. You've been the white whale at Stark Industries for months, Parker. Happy cleaned out all May's things after the funeral, but he was baffled by a social security card and birth certificate and passport and photos and all this stuff about some kid named Peter. Not to mention some unfiled adoption papers with Tony's signature on them. Happy claims to have never met any teenage relative of May's with that name. Can't find you in any database. Peter's eyes welled. I still exist. Yeah, and I made double damned sure of it. Maria offered him a tissue from her pocket. My team and I are specialists at creating digital footprints and identities for people. Clint aimed wry eyes at Maria. Don't I know it? Hush, Barton. The adults are talking. Maria didn't even look away from Peter to sass him. Peter, we went back into every major database in the US and made sure you're in them from birth all the way until now. Records replaced at the hospital, schooling history. You have a social security number, and so far as the government is concerned, you're Peter Parker, age 17, in the care of CPS since all legal guardians named in May's will have passed. Your passport is also updated and validated just in case. We expedited. Peter launched himself forward, straight at Maria. He blubbered into her jacket. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I haven't been a person in so long. Maria's arms windmilled out of reflex action rather than balance issues, like she was ready to shoot something on instinct just to protect this gangly little creature. She blinked at Clint, then the mop of curls on her chest. The surprise wore off quick enough for Maria to wrap her arms around Peter and rub his back. Clint snuck a photo with his phone, to which Maria flipped him the bird. You're very welcome, Parker. You saved the universe for us, so it's the least we can do. She explored behind her back with a mystified look at Clint. He's really sticky. Clint laughed. Peter, red and starry-eyed and looking like Peter, stepped back. I really appreciate it, Miss Hill. Call me Maria, and that's not all I did. That's everything I need to have a life, though. Peter looked between the two adults. Clint leaned down to catch his eyes. Not everything, bub. That's Laura and I, have something we've been meaning to ask you. Offer you, really. He glanced up at Maria. It went through. Please, Barton. You're an Avenger and you have the most stable home environment known to man. Between that and my presence in the room, they sorted it out in an hour. Perfect. Peter's eyes clouded. What's going on? Sorted out what? Pete, what I'm about to offer, you have every right to refuse. Clint forced himself to say it, though it slaughtered something in his chest. I still have to ask the kids anyway, but I wanted to know how you feel about this first. You can go to a foster home, or Happy, or even another Avenger would probably be thrilled to have you. Peter's flush drained out of his cheeks. Clint couldn't help himself and cupped the cherub face in both hands. Peter Benjamin Parker, he said in a sacrosanct tone, we want to adopt you. A taffy beat of silence stretched. Clint and Maria didn't dare to be the first to break it, a right belonging solely to Peter. The boy's mouth worked. Like, permanently? Permanently, said Clint. Until you're old and grey, all of you. Wall-crawling Mario Kart skills and all. The face got kind of heavy in Clint's hands before he realized what was happening. His eyes widened. Whoa! He snatched Peter around the waist just in time to save the boy a nasty fall and sat him back against the treehouse ladder, kneeling in front of him. Peter breathed like a matador, about 2 scraggly inches away from a panic attack. Easy, Bubba. It's all right. Can you follow my breathing pattern? Clint left one hand on Peter's face and guided the boy's palm to his chest with the other. That's it. There we go. Slow it down. There's no pressure here, and there's no wrong answer. I won't be mad if... Yes! Clint lost his own breath. What? You... I want that. Peter and Clint's faces skewed at the same time. It scares me, but I don't want to go back to living with strangers or on the streets. This is where I belong. Clint had him up in his arms before he'd even finished. Peter ended up keening that last word into Clint's chest. Thank you. He breathed by Peter's ear. Thank you for being willing to trust someone just one more time, after you've been let down so often. Maria crouched beside them, hands clasped, eyes warm. You won't even have to foster for the usual probation period, Clint. The adoption papers are in my car, and I can take them back with me to file tonight once you sign. Other than a state-mandated wellness check from a social worker and a doctor's assessment, he's all yours. More waterworks from Clint, but Peter's reaction to this wasn't the hysterics they expected. Peter laughed. Laughed. Real, genuine, carefree laughter, like when they took Nate to the water park and he skipped through all the sprayers. It was a child's laugh, pure happiness distilled into one sound. Maybe Maria ended up crying a little too. Maybe. Clint would never tell. Clint somehow managed to resist vibrating out of his own skin for the duration of their ravioli supper. Laura's hand on his knee certainly helped, grounding him to the present. Is this how kids felt on Christmas Eve? It had to be. Clint had no frame of reference for that courtesy of his dreary and violent childhood, but he imagined this is how it felt. Maria got that bottle of beer after all, tapping it to Clint in a toast before she left. She wasn't as affectionate as the Barton family, but in a rare demonstrative display, she kissed each of the kids' heads as she slipped her coat on, even Peter's. I'll walk her out, the boy offered. Thanks, Pete. Clint stayed seated and waved Maria goodbye. Don't wait 10 months to drop by again, Director. Only if there's dessert next time. And then she was gone, put together as ever, even though he spotted her holding back a smitten smile for Peter at her side as he talked with both his voice and his hands, endeared like they all were to the boy, and her mascara had smeared at the edges. An excited-eyed Laura nodded at Clint. Go time. So, guys. Clint leaned forward on the table. In a helpful turn of events, Lila, Cooper and Nathaniel all sat on the same side of the table across from him, since they'd had to make room for Maria's extra chair. It allowed Clint to maintain tight eye contact. I have something to run by you. Something big. This is a huge change, so don't be afraid to share how you feel. The kids had a silent conversation with their eyes. Or Lila and Cooper did. Nate just nodded, eating the last of his ravioli with his fingers and getting tomato sauce all over himself. It's about Peter. Clint went over the rehearsed words again and, in a very Tony-esque twist, threw them all out the window. How would you feel if he stayed here for the long haul? If that spare bedroom became his bedroom, permanently?
Petey was gonna leave?
Nate quavered.
Why? He can't leave. He needs to go swimming with us at the beach this summer and finish his bedtime stories about Mr. Cosmo.
Well, that was one kid down. 2 to go. Cooper narrowed his eyes and wagged a finger between Laura and Clint. To be real, I thought you guys adopted him already. Laura snickered. We're terrible spies, Clint. Yeah, and terrible fakers. You guys both love him a lot. It doesn't bother you? Clint eyed Cooper. He had to be sure or he was calling Hill to shred those papers she'd taken with her, no matter how much it would hurt. The spot by Peter's signature had a wet tear stain, and Clint had extracted promises from Hill he'd get a copy of that exact page. But Clint would gash his heart out of his chest for his kids, biological or otherwise. They needed to feel at home here too. Why would it bother me? Cooper's eyes widened. Peter's amazing. The best and only real friend I've had since the blip. Can you imagine sending him into foster care system? No offense, Dad, but he'd die in like a year. Clint didn't mean to slump in such obvious relief, but Cooper just smiled at the motion. Laura reached across the table for their daughter's hand. Lila? The boys turned to her. Lila stared at the table, her lips in a scrunch one way, then the other. She sniffed. You were really empty inside last year. Clint frowned. This discussion isn't about me. But it is. Because now you're not like that. Now you laugh and actually smile like before the snap. Maybe even before the Battle of New York. Clint's chest ached and he grasped her other hand. Peter saved Nate's life, said Lila. And he saved yours these last 2 months. Clint nodded. He really did. Lila squeezed his fingers. I think he's already family anyway. I don't want him to go. The chair scraped when Clint stood and walked around to pull her to his chest. She twined her arms around his neck in that toddler way she'd never outgrown. Love you, Daddy. Love you too, Li. Clint kissed her hair. I'm so proud of you. Thank you, all of you, for giving this a chance. Nate slapped his fork on his plate, flecking the ceiling with red.
Yay! Spiderman gets to stay!
The whole table gasped and Clint rounded on his youngest. How on God's green earth did you know that? Nate sent him a shrewd look.
Petey can stand on my wall sideways, Dad. Just like in the YouTube videos. He told me it was a circus trick and not real, but I recognized it.
Unbelievable, Clint muttered. Laura laughing at all of them so hard she had to put her head on the table. Peter is Spider-Man? Cooper flopped back in his chair. I'm so glad he didn't die like the news said. That Statue of Liberty footage was awful. He was Spider-Man. Was being the operative word. And it is a very big secret that no one will go blabbing. Understood? Fear gripped Clint's heart. Does this change anyone's mind about us adopting him? Are you kidding? Lila grinned up at him.
This all makes so much more sense now. Dad, he fought with you and saved the world. How could we not want him around? Besides, superheroes in the house is kind of the norm for us.
Clint wilted against the back of Lila's chair, a pool of happy and dizzy goo he hoped never hardened again. The table was in a delighted uproar until the porch door tapped shut and Peter walked into the kitchen. A silence fell, thick but packed full of a million ready questions. The kids gawked at Peter. Peter stared back. Laura rescued him by pointing at the ceiling with a bright smile. Can you wipe up that tomato sauce? Sorry you got bombarded last night. Peter shrugged. Was kinda nice. Nice? Clint helped him tuck a fresh fitted sheet around the mattress. Cooper asked if you lay eggs. Not the first time someone's wondered about that. At least Lila seemed appeased that my skill at Mario Kart is actually an unfair physiological advantage, and not just me being better at it than her. Clint shook his head, cheeks sore from smiling so much. Welcome to Crazy Town. Population of 6 now. Peter's ears rose in that automatic way that hadn't worn off yet. Probably wouldn't for a long time. Clint had already fired off a thumbs-up text to Maria, their signal that the kids had accepted and were excited about the adoption. This time tomorrow, Pete would be officially theirs. Not a Barton, though. Both Peter and Clint had insisted he'd keep his last name. He'd had enough identity stripped from him as is. Peter wrangled the sheet on next. Clint tucked in one side while Peter smoothed the other. It was the harmonious quiet of two people working together, mirroring each other's motions across the wide dunes of a star-patterned bedsheets, an established rhythm Clint was amazed to note started long before Pete came to live under their roof. Once the kids had finished yelling in amazement about Pete climbing the wall to clean off Nate's ravioli stain, it had been one request for information after another. Cooper had asked to look at his lymph node, the giant nerd. The novelty hadn't even come close to wearing off when Clint ordered everyone to bed, since the teens had exams tomorrow. Even then, they hadn't split up and calmed down until after midnight. Getting a treehouse and a new big brother and meeting Spiderman all in one day was apparently way beyond the too cool to process limit. How are you feeling about all this? Clint asked. Peter took his time hugging a pillowcase over the bamboo pillow. He played with the zipper. It's new. I haven't had to adjust to a different home since I was 7 when my parents died. I'm looking forward to it though. Being here. This look hadn't ghosted across Peter's features in such a long time that it delayed Clint from recognizing it. Clint too stopped moving. You have nothing to feel guilty about, Pete. May would want you to be happy and taken care of. It's not that. Peter's eyes fixed in the distance, in the past. It's just, I was always hiding my injuries and vigilante stuff from May, patching bullet wounds with Thor band-aids. Adrenaline shot down Clint's spine and skipped a pulse beat in his toes. Bullet wounds. Wounds, plural. The trained part of his mind flashed the questions of caliber and distance from impact and whether any of those bullets nicked larger veins. This kid stole a gauntlet off Thanos, Clint reminded himself. Peter had killed people. Aliens, but still people by some definition, on the battlefield. Still, the image of him huddled on the floor by a tiny apartment bathtub, holding in whimpers of agony to conceal a bullet wound, and didn't that just give Clint 5 automatic grey hairs, made his fists tremble with the desperate and utterly futile need to do something about it. But he could. He could ensure it never happened again. And we struggled to make ends meet for so long, Peter continued. So I never asked for more food or anything. I can't remember a time after my 11th birthday when I wasn't hungry, even before the spider bit me. That'll never happen here, Clint rasped out. He cleared his throat and it stabilized a little. We'll always find food for you, even if we have to starve to do so. Which is doubtful because I grow a mean potato crop. Also, you're never hiding injuries from us. Ever. New rule right now. Peter looked down, but he smiled. I'm looking forward to the fact that I don't have to. Is it wrong that here feels safe? He trailed off and didn't complete that S word, switching it out for another one. Feels easier? Like I don't have to take care of anyone? Clint recovered his breath enough to sit on the bed and pat a spot next to him. After a beat, Peter took the hint. Not wrong at all, Peter. Who better to understand crime-fighting problems than someone who used to fight crime for a living? The blush was back. I'm amazed you still want me, that you even thought to ask. I've wanted you in our lives for far longer than you'll ever know. It even crossed my mind during those 2 weeks at the lake house. Peter ducked his head. I needed that time to decompress before starting school again. Having you around made it easier. I needed it too. A question that had niggled Clint the whole week cropped up again. Did you know where I lived? Is that why you trekked here? Peter shook his head. No, I just kind of wondered. It's sheer coincidence that I ended up on your property. A few times, there were a couple nights where I felt my body shutting down. Clint's pulse picked up again, but I sensed a voice telling me I wasn't done yet, that it wasn't my time to go. So I got up each day and kept walking, more and more walking until I was too weak to do even that. I'm glad you wound up here. I'd started to forget who I was until you appeared, Peter admitted, tone strained. Felt erased. Dead, said Peter, and Clint grabbed his hand in an external indulgence of the inner desperation. Like I'd actually been killed that day. Talking got harder and harder over the winter as the hunger grew, until one day a lady at the soup kitchen asked what kind of milk I wanted in my coffee, and I couldn't open my mouth. Clint thumbed at his knuckles. Where'd you learn sign? From some deaf guys at the shelter. I didn't even know you signed until the day you found me. Clint smiled, faint. No need to at the lake house, with my aid working fine. Right, of course that makes sense. The guys at the shelter also... They helped fend off some of the big dudes who tried to mess with me, steal my stuff. Some days, it was a fight in the alley just to eat without it being taken. For the first time in years, I didn't have my powers, and the men would loom over me. A shiver ran through Peter all the way to his slender fingertips. Couldn't do anything. It completed one last confusing part of the puzzle for Clint, why Peter had been so scared of him at first, even when he knew who Clint was. Food equals violence. It was an association they'd have to chip away at proving wrong, with every unthreatening interaction at the dinner table. One in a long list of things Clint wanted to make better in Peter's life. Clint fought another wave of adrenaline at Peter being scared to approach a source of food, scared to enter the doors of a soup kitchen or losing fights to keep what was given to him. They hit you? Peter gripped Clint's hand, hard. A bit of super strength leaked into the hold. Sometimes. Used to slap me or tug on my hair. One guy had a truck stop along the way, spit in my eyes for sleeping under his rig. His buddy kicked me in the face too, cracked my sinus bone. That's how I got the bruise. I'm sorry, Clint whispered. He clamped a lid on the rage roasting in his stomach. He'd leave that trucker assault tidbit with Maria to take care of. I promise I'll never hurt you or take advantage of my size like that. I have some of my powers back now anyway. They help me defend myself. Clint shook his head. Not the point, Peter. I don't care if you're as big as the Hulk. I promise I'll never give you a reason to fear me or break that trust. I know, said Peter, and Clint breathed freer. He reached into the top drawer of the bedside table. I was going to wait until the papers go through, but I think you could use it now. Clint hadn't bothered to wrap the gift, just set the entire box on Pete's knee. Peter gaped at it, then at Clint. A camera? Open her, bud. Peter did, a bustle of motions, yet somehow still gentle with the lenses and buttons. Something this advanced would have taken Clint ages to set up, but Pete scrolled through the view menu and had the settings figured out in a few minutes. It's digital, but I also have an old film camera downstairs that you're welcome to use. We can get them developed every few months. Add them to the album if you want. Though you're going to need a new one soon.
Clint,
Peter shook his head.
I don't know how to thank you. This is huge.
Clint chuckled. Thank me by using it. Make some new memories with us. For now, just take a picture. Clint figured Peter would bring the camera up to his eye and snap a photo of Clint himself, or maybe demand a selfie of them together like his kids always did. Maybe even their feet side by side on the floor. But Peter's eyes drifted to the dresser by the door. Moonlight fell across Trike, sitting atop the folded Star Wars pants next to Natasha's old hairbrush, red strands spooled in milky beams. Peter twisted the lens into focus and clicked the button. No flash. The sound of the shutter retracting woke something in Clint, a facet of love's hope long untouched. He smiled in the dark. Peter showed Clint the screen. My first still life portrait. The old and the new together in one place. Clint wrapped an arm around Peter's back and felt a curly head roost on his shoulder. I like the sound of that.